Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. I thought I'd go ahead and throw this together on 5 tips to a happy marriage, especially with, at the time I'm shooting this video, it's actually the middle of March, and our 33rd anniversary is at the end of March 2023. These are not in any order of importance because, well, they're all important. But the first one I have written down is that marriage is about both parties giving 100%. When Patrick and I, before we got married, and the pastor was doing the counseling sessions with us, the first question he asked us was, what percentage should each spouse give to a marriage? When we both just said 100%. And he was actually surprised because he'd never had anyone actually answer it that way, because most people will answer it 50-50. But the problem with that is when you think that way, that means what you're saying is that you each only have to give 50% into the marriage itself, when each should be putting in 100% of effort and love to make it work. Because marriage, as any of you who's been married for any amount of time would know, is work. It's not easy. You're taking 2 solitary people that are going to have their very own thoughts and opinions and different ways of being raised and pushing them together. And no one person is perfect, and thus no one marriage is perfect. But we can each put in 100% of ourselves to try to make it as perfect as we can make it. And it really does take both people doing that. Now, I'm not saying Patrick and I haven't had our issues and our hard times, because we have. I'm not saying we haven't had our moments throughout our marriage where either one of us or both have been quite selfish, because, it's in all of our nature to be selfish. And anyone who claims to not ever be selfish is a liar, and they're deceiving themselves, if not everyone else. It is work, and so we constantly have to strive to put in that 100%. I put this one in number 2 because it's something I see a lot, especially in the past 5-10 years, especially on social media, is public shaming of your spouse. This should never, ever, ever, ever be done by anyone. Now, I'm not talking about people who are in an abusive relationship, because I understand what it's like being in an abusive relationship, because I was in one before I met Patrick. And this was an emotionally abusive relationship rather than physical, but it's still abuse, and it's still very, very difficult. And those things we do need to talk about. I'm just talking about if you're mad at your spouse because they didn't give you your monthly allowance, or let you buy this, or take you to your favorite restaurant, or whatever. I mean, things that aren't serious life-threatening or mental and emotionally threatening things. We shouldn't be airing our dirty laundry on Facebook and other social media platforms, because not only is this absolute complete disrespect, not only is this not following the golden rule, just think about how you would feel if your spouse was doing the same to you, airing all your dirty laundry on social media. What this is doing is you're only sharing one side of a story. So I'm going to give you an example of something I saw quite a few years ago from people that I know pretty well. And the wife had publicly aired her grievances about her husband. And it had to do with money and him not giving her enough money to buy things. And a lot of other women were coming in going, oh, that's terrible, blah, 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 and making all these comments and putting the husband down without knowing all the facts. Now, so both sides are wrong. She was wrong to air the dirty laundry. All these people coming in and commenting were also wrong, because they're only hearing one side of the story. And so I promptly went in, and I know both these people. I know they both have their issues, and they're both good people. I didn't know exactly what was going on. I just knew the whole thing was wrong. And I said, not one single person in here commenting on this post has a right to say anything, because they don't know both sides of the story. And then I went on to say, this post should have never been made, and I recommend it gets deleted immediately. And she did delete it, and she realized she was in the wrong for doing that. And, then hearing the whole story, which the husband did come in and say, and understanding that really in this situation, the wife was being very selfish because the husband had been laid off from work. He didn't have his usual amount of money to give to her to spend on whatever she wanted. We're not talking about buying necessary items. We're talking about her buying clothes and other things that she really didn't need, just things that she wanted. And he actually did basically give her a monthly allowance, but he didn't have it that month. So it's important to understand the whole story before anybody goes in and comments on such posts like that. But regardless, this is not the way to happy marriage. So if your spouse was doing the same thing to you, how would you feel? It's not anybody else's business what's going on other than between you and your spouse and God. And if you have to have somebody come in and help intervene to talk to, then yes, but we shouldn't be involving the whole community into something like that. We all are going to have our issues. We're going to all have things to deal with. And I see far too many man-bashing posts going on. And it's just, women want this respect, but they're totally disrespecting their husbands by doing this very thing. And so if we as women, so obviously as a woman, I'm going to be speaking more to women. If we as women want respect and honor from our husbands, we need to be willing to show them that same respect and honor, even when we think they don't deserve it, because we're all faulty and we're all imperfect. And that kind of steps into my next point, with number 3, which is whether you're getting married or you're already been married for 15, 20, 50 years, we need to stop expecting our spouse to change for us. That's never the right attitude to go into any marriage or even in a marriage. If we want our spouses to change, and I know this phrase is probably often used, but it really does apply. We have to change ourselves. We have to be the change that we want to see in our marriage. And like I said, none of us are perfect. So when we see our spouse behaving a certain way or doing things that we don't like or appreciate, yes, we can politely let them know that, this is what I would prefer, or, I really wish you wouldn't do that. And I have done that with Patrick at times. That he used to tell this joke that he thought it was funny and he didn't mean it hurtful, but I found it hurtful when he would say it. And usually we can joke around no problem in front of other people. I don't care and find it actually kind of loving when he calls me old blister in front of old people. That doesn't bother me. There were certain other jokes that he would say that I found embarrassing and hurtful. And once I let him know that, in not an angry manner, not screaming at him, but in a respectful manner, just saying, that when you do that in front of other people, I find it really is hurtful. And I really wish you would stop. And he was actually surprised because he didn't know it affected me that deeply. And so he stopped. He respected me just like I showed him the respect in the way that I asked him to stop doing that. But when it comes to other things like, instead of constantly hounding, that's not the way to get things done, especially if we're rude and mean and screaming. Everybody's going to have their bad little habits about things. Some things we can simply learn to overlook. Like it used to bother me when Patrick would leave caps open on things, in the shower, shampoo containers or whatever. But instead of complaining about it, I would just shut them myself. And the same thing goes with the toilet seat. I never let that bother me. If the toilet seat got left up, I would put it down. And I was grateful for the fact that my husband would put the toilet seat up in the first place. So these are the little things that instead of harping about it, it's just as easy for the woman to come along and put the seat down as it is for the man to do it. And he has to put it up in the first place. So we need to be grateful for that. And I'm sure husbands on the other side could find similar things. And so how can we change ourselves to make ourselves be more patient with those little things, like socks or underwear being left on the floor instead of put directly in the wash or into a hamper? Because let's stop and look around. What are our little bad habits that we do that we just don't even think about, that our spouse probably finds very irritating? And we need to clean those things up. It's the whole idea of of, removing the log or plank from our own eye before we try to peck out the speck in another's eye. So we can still peck out that speck, but let's make sure that we're removing that plank from our own eye before we do that. Besides, we'll be able to see better, right? The change needs to happen with yourself, whether it be learning more patience to deal with whatever it is, or being a good example, or changing our own problems that are bothering them. And then when we do that, when we show that we're willing to change ourselves and clean up our own acts, then our spouses are going to be more likely to clean up their act as well, sometimes without you even having to say a word. And that goes right along with the next point, which is showing respect and gratitude. And this needs to happen both ways. So in a marriage, especially the longer that people have been married, or especially if you're one that goes into a marriage just expecting to be waited on and treated like a princess, well, we can't expect to be respected and to have our spouse be grateful for the things that we do for them if we're not showing that same the other way around. So if I make something for Patrick or do something for Patrick and get up and pour him a cup of coffee, and he doesn't say thank you every time I do that, I don't think anything of that. But, and he is good about that, by the way, but especially now, because when I started learning to show gratitude for every little thing, even the things that are simple and is really our spouse's job, be it they clean up this or fix that or, repair that or whatever it is that they're doing, when we show love and gratitude for these things on a daily basis, then instead of these things becoming to the person who's doing the work, instead of them now starting to do it begrudgingly, they're going to be more happy to do it because they know that their spouse appreciates what they do, even if it's already expected out of them. So when I make a dinner for Patrick, even though that's my job, he still thanks me for it. When he gets up and pours me a cup of coffee as I'm sitting there editing a video, I thank him for that. Even if he was already up pouring himself coffee, I still thank him for that little added gesture. So again, if we want our spouses to be grateful for the things that we do for them, we need to be able to show them that same gratitude and respect and honor. And instead of demanding it out of them, we need to show and lead by example in these areas. And the more I started realizing this and doing that in my own marriage, the more the respect and honor started coming back. I'm not saying Patrick was ever disrespectful or unthankful, but there are things that all of us, we take for granted. It's just what we do. And we're all guilty of that. I don't care who you are, we've all been guilty of that. But it does make a difference when we actively try to show this on a daily basis. And then the fifth point is recognize when you're wrong. So a lot of people just can't stand being wrong. That also is in our nature. We hate it when we're wrong about something, whether it be something that we misinterpreted from our spouse and got on to them about it, or something we said in a wrong way, or something we said out of anger. And even if we felt justified in our anger, what we said was hurtful and cruel. We need to admit when we're wrong. And for a lot of people, I know this is tough. When you're wrong, you realize it, especially if it's been in the heat of the moment, you may need to calm down a little bit, but admit to it. And the sooner you admit to it, the better. There's been situations, whether it be with my kids or my spouse, where I realized I said something wrong. And I was still mad at the time, but I just immediately apologized and said, I don't want to talk about this right now because I'm too mad, but I know I was wrong for what I just said or what I just did. And we can talk about it later once I'm calm. Because that, and that goes right along with that, because, you don't want the sun to go down on your wrath, but it is best to be able to calm down and think logically, especially for us women. We don't often think about things logically. We think of things based on emotion. So We have to set aside our emotion and we have to look at the situation, what happened, what was said, what was done, what needs to be done, and try to focus on that before we come back and then just say, okay, I was wrong for the way I handled this. Yes, this was based completely off my emotion. And even if they said hurtful things to attack you, don't bring that up. Just talk about where you were wrong and apologize. And that is, again, definitely not the time that you bring up where they're wrong, because then it basically just makes your apology null and void. Usually what will happen is once you admit your own fault, even if it takes, sometimes it can be immediate, sometimes it can take a while, but your spouse will then follow your example in this, and they will also admit and apologize when they are wrong. So if we cannot see our own problem when we're all, and this really ties into pretty much all the points. If we can't see whenever we're wrong, then we're making ourselves out to be this perfect person and only pointing out the flaws in the other. And none of us are perfect. We all make mistakes, and we all have to take a step back, and we have to lead by example and through love and apologize when we know we're wrong. Because remember, they're wrong sometimes too. You want them to acknowledge when they're wrong. You want them to apologize, but how do you expect them to do that when you're not willing to do it yourself? As a woman, especially in the past, I don't know how many years now, I've seen this on the woman's side get worse and worse and worse. And maybe it's because it's all more public. You know, women constantly complaining about their spouses, but you better bet if it was a man that was complaining about his wife, social media would absolutely implode with angry women. And yet they'll do the same thing. So yes, we just simply cannot expect our spouse to be able to do all the things that we're unwilling to do ourselves. So it really, key to a happy marriage really starts with ourselves and making and practicing these steps. Like I said, Patrick and I have been through a couple of rough patches in our marriage, which I think anybody who's been married as long as we have or longer, or even only married 5 years, has to admit they've been through rough patches, because you're taking two totally different people and melding them together, and there's a lot to learn. It's a lot of work. And if you want it to work, you can't just give up when things get tough. You got to look at all these points. Think about what you can do to change yourself. So anyway, there's my 5 points. Anyone else would like to chime in and give some ideas, especially those who've been married for a while, or even if you've only been married 5 or 10 years, but you've learned some important tips that have really helped your marriage to grow and get stronger, share those with us in comments down below. And thanks for watching. Take care and God bless.